Alright, Donkey Kong 64, let's go. Alright, let's pop this puppy in. Alright, let's go. Oh, what? Oh, it comes with it. Ugh! What? What the hell is going on? Where's the expansion pack at? Whoa! Whoa, 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 whoa. Thanks, Funky. Alright. Let's play. Donkey Kong, one of Nintendo's premier franchises that you'd be surprised how little they actually utilize. Donkey Kong was Nintendo's first smash hit video game franchise under their belt and pioneered their transition into the gaming market. I mean, before Donkey Kong, there was Space Fever. Are you having fun yet? Ever since the first title in 1981, Nintendo has come to build a vast library of franchises, characters, and legendary stories to cement them as one of the biggest names in gaming. I've always found it interesting that Donkey Kong, despite being a household name and one of the most popular video game characters of all time, has remained a relatively sidelined IP for most of its life. I mean, until 1994, Donkey Kong just kind of lived in Mario's shadow, relegated to re-releases of the arcade classic. Sure, Donkey Kong 94 was its own thing, but to casual audiences, it was just the same old Donkey Kong that we all knew. I mean, let's take a look at Mario. His post-arcade run is nothing like the original Mario Bros. Game. Yeah, it might have a lot of the same plumber aesthetic, but these are full-blown platforming adventures, something those arcade cabinets could only dream of replicating. Mario had taken the leap from Donkey Kong's shadow to a full-blown cultural icon, one Donkey Kong had never seen. And Nintendo knew this. They wanted Donkey Kong to return to the status that he'd previously held before Mario took it. Why not have two franchises that are known worldwide for the revolutionary platformers? Well, Nintendo understood that it had to be different from Mario, just like how the Super Mario Bros. Franchise was different from the original arcade game, or like how Blood Meridian's different from Bob's Burgers. So, in 1993, Nintendo tasked British game developer Rareware to lead the project for the Super Nintendo, and that project was Donkey Kong Country. Revolutionary graphics, exhilarating gameplay, and charming new characters. The Donkey Kong franchise had just received the refresh of a lifetime, and the best part, it was nothing like Mario. Sure, it's a 2D platformer, but it played and felt so much different than Mario. DK had become his very own, completely standalone franchise. The game did so well, they popped out 2 more of these bad boys, and you didn't even play as Donkey Kong in these ones. The world that Rare had built was so different that Donkey Kong had officially left behind the arcade merchant reputation and become one of the biggest names in gaming once again. By the time the third installment of the DKC franchise had released, the next Nintendo console, the Nintendo 64, had already been out, and the capabilities of this console were incredible. Full 3D worlds with groundbreaking graphics. At the time. The future of gaming was here, and this console is where Rare would really hit their prime. Titles like Banjo-Kazooie, Perfect Dark, and GoldenEye 007. If they were doing this good without even touching Donkey Kong yet, then imagine what they could do with the already massive world of Donkey Kong Country that they'd already built, but this time in a brand new dimension. So, in 1999, Rare decided it was finally time for the King of Swing to make his debut in 3D with Donkey Kong 64. Yeah, this game isn't the best. With 5 characters, all with their own unique collectibles, amounting to an absurd 3,821 things to find for 100% completion, this game has not aged the best. If you like backtracking the video game, here, go nuts. Although met with good scores by critics, this game is an absolute pain at times, both metaphorically and physically in my brain, because I keep getting distracted by another trail of transparent bananas that I can't pick up because I'm not fucking Lanky Kong.
The world of Donkey Kong 64 was ridiculously impressive. The atmosphere, the soundtrack were all top-notch for the N64. This game's just filled with way too much shit. Hell, it's filled with so much shit, they had to pack in extra memory for the game to work properly.
So after this game, Donkey Kong was indeed back, but at what cost? His first venture into 3D was alright at best, and with the rapidly evolving video game market transitioning away from 2D gaming almost entirely, where could DK go next that would suit him best? Racing, obviously! Announced with the new Nintendo GameCube was the next Donkey Kong titled Donkey Kong Racing, a sequel to Diddy Kong Racing on the Nintendo 64. And it looked like a tech demo. Yeah, so at the GameCube event, all the games were just pre-rendered tech demos showing what the games on the system could look like, not actual gameplay.
However, this strange-looking trailer will be all we would get from Donkey Kong Racing, as in 2002, Microsoft would purchase Rareware in its entirety, effectively canceling the game for good. And without a developer focused on making new Donkey Kong titles, things got a little awkward.
Now that Rare was gone, Nintendo was just kind of left with Donkey Kong sitting on their porch like a lost child. They hadn't really been heavily involved in a new Donkey Kong title in nearly 10 years now, and now they just didn't really know where to take the series next. Luckily for Nintendo, Microsoft would continue to allow Rare to develop games for the Game Boy Advance, which meant that Rareware-developed Donkey Kong games could continue to thrive, just on weaker and far more limited hardware that Microsoft didn't see as any sort of competition due to them not being in the handheld market. So, the first post-Rare acquisition Donkey Kong game to come out was, what?
I said I played these games before!
Yeah, so over the next few years, Rare would make handheld ports of the original Donkey Kong Country series. In fact, this was the third time they had released this game. Now, to be fair, these games do look pretty similar to the Super Nintendo versions, but obviously not one-to-one. The colors are kind of bright, so it could be visible on the original GBA console since that screen wasn't backlit for some weird reason. I mean, the damn Sega Game Gear, which came out over 10 years before the GBA, has a backlit screen. There really wasn't any excuse. Anyways, unnecessary rant, sorry. All in all, these are certainly comparable ways to play the original trilogy, but they aren't anything new. So, what could Nintendo do with Donkey Kong on home consoles? 2D platformers have never been more dead, and DK was definitely in need of a brand new game. Still not comfortable with taking DK into their own hands, Nintendo handed him over to Namco to make the next installment of the DK franchise for home consoles. Donkey Konga. So yeah, Donkey Kong's first console game since Rare's departure is a rhythm game for the GameCube, coming with a set of bongos. Get used to these guys. I've heard a lot of things about this game. Not too many good things, but a lot of things. A lot of people say it's a fine rhythm game, and it definitely has its merit, but the bongos definitely start to hurt your hands after a few songs. And not only that, but they are loud as hell. With games like Guitar Hero, all you're doing is pressing buttons on a very guitar-shaped controller. But with Donkey Konga, you are literally playing a pair of plastic bongos, and you have to hit them hard enough to register the notes you're playing correctly. So if little Jimmy is trying to sneak a quick playthrough of Turkish March when he's supposed to be asleep, yeah, he's out of luck. Now, little Jimmy can play with the normal GameCube controller just fine, but then I'm just playing a rhythm game with Donkey Kong staring at me sensually. I don't feel like Donkey Kong when I play with the controller, but when I play with the bongos, I don't feel anything after 3 songs because of how bad my hands hurt. And apparently they were like, fuck it, let's give them more. Donkey Konga 2 is more Donkey Konga. That's really it. Except this game has All-Star by Smash Mouth, so yeah, it's probably better. There was also a third game, but that was a Japan exclusive. Apparently there's something in this game that the Western world isn't capable of comprehending.
So far for the GameCube, Donkey Kong is relegated to rhythm games and nothing else. Real DK fans were wondering, where was the Donkey Kong that we all knew and loved? They wanted a real mainline DK platformer for the newest generation of Nintendo. And soon enough, Nintendo delivered.
The first completely in-house DK game for the Nintendo GameCube was finally coming out. Donkey Kong Jungle Beat.
Finally, a new 2D Donkey Kong game for the GameCube. You know what that means? I can finally get rid of the DK bongos. I was trying to 100% Boombastic by Shaggy, but that doesn't matter, alright? I can finally get rid of these. DK bongos, I'll see you in hell!
Now, I will say, the games do not need the bongos, they were completely optional, just like Donkey Konga, but the game was specifically made with them being used in mind, so I kind of feel like a sinner playing with this. Later down the line, Nintendo actually re-released this game on the Wii with new play controls, which I assume is the best of both worlds, a traditional controller experience with some added bongo movements to replicate the originally intended controller scheme.
And honestly, it's pretty fun.
It's very different from any other 2D DK game I've played, and you can definitely tell the developers of Mario Galaxy were behind this one. From the character designs, to the font, to the exact same flower twirl mechanic. This game is a very nice time if you have an afternoon to burn. It's not extremely challenging or anything like the original Super Nintendo games could be at times. It's just a chill DK experience with some added violent handshaking motions.
So while it's not exactly what we wanted, it does have its own unique charm and isn't trying to be like a traditional platformer that we had all been asking for. And I have a ton of respect for this game and what it's trying to do. I mean, it made a whole damn game compatible with a pair of bongos. Now, our first completely in-house portable DK game would come in 2004 with the release of Mario vs. Donkey Kong.
How ironic is it that the first rareless Donkey Kong game on handhelds is a spiritual successor to the last rareless handheld Donkey Kong game? It's like Nintendo is only capable of making a portable DK game in this fashion. This little puzzle platformer is obviously very different from what we were used to when it came to Donkey Kong games, and to be honest, I think that's just because this is far more a Mario game than it is a Donkey Kong game. You don't even play as Donkey Kong in this one, he's actually the antagonist in this game. You play as Mario, which has you traversing through several DK-like stages, completing puzzles and platforming through different worlds to get to Donkey Kong, who stole a ton of Mario toys. Get used to these guys too. Although, yes, his name is in the title and he's in the game, this isn't really considered a Donkey Kong game by most. It's just a spin-off Mario game that Donkey Kong happens to be in. You could replace DK with Bowser and it's just another Mario spin-off. I mean, you replace DK with Mario in Donkey Kong Country, see, that just looks icky.
Shortly after Mario vs. Donkey Kong came DK King of Swing, a puzzle platformer for the Game Boy Advance. Yeah, there really isn't too much to this one. I mean, it's a fun little game if you have like 3 minutes to burn.
The game consists of you swinging from peg to peg to reach the end of the level. It's pretty simple. K. Rool and the Kremlings are back as the main villains though, so at least we know for sure that Nintendo isn't afraid of using them post-Rare acquisition.
And honestly, that's a trend that we see a lot in these new Donkey Kong games. Since none of them are being made by Rare, save for the SNES ports, the worlds that Donkey Kong finds himself in these games is way different than what we're used to.
Completely new villains, or the villains we have seen before, don't offer too much different from what the original games set up already. We used to see K. Rool take on a different persona every single game, from a pirate to Frankenstein to Darth Vader. I think that's what they're kind of going with in DK64.
I hope for your sake you're right this time.
You see the Kremlings in a new game, they'll be the exact same as when you last saw them, and honestly, that takes a lot of fun out of them. The Kremlings have always been unique and had personalities. They were completely different from the traditional video game enemy like Koopas, but now, yeah, they're just kind of there. A sequel to King of Swing, DK Jumble Climber, came out, this time on the DS, and it's more King of Swing. Okay, that's doing the game a little injustice there. The game has a ton of quality of life improvements that the original struggled from, and the graphics are much higher quality. The graphics on the original weren't bad by any means, it had its own unique style that no other Donkey Kong game had at the time, and honestly, I think I prefer it. But when it came to putting the game's formula onto a new system, better graphics were obviously the way to go instead of continuing the style of the GBA game. This time fully supporting the actual renders we had been seeing on the console games for a while.
Anyways, our next game is a sequel to Mario vs. Donkey Kong, March of the Minis for the DS. Once again, Donkey Kong is the antagonist and you spend the entire game beating him up with wind-up Mario toys.
This would be the first game in the series to have the infamous mini format, a key game mechanic that would stick throughout the rest of the series until the remake of the original game in 2024. Essentially, you'd release a ton of Mario toys onto the level and have them traverse through the obstacles for you. This game is a lot more timing based and it's definitely pretty different from the last game. Unfortunately, we cannot say that for the games to come. Let's just get them out of the way. The next two games in the Mario vs. Donkey Kong franchise are Miniland Mayhem and Minis March Again. Are you seeing a pattern here? Nintendo was a huge fan of the Minis gimmick and made it become a mainstay in the series after the second game. Except in Miniland Mayhem, the game is more focused on creating paths for the Minis, which definitely freshens up the gameplay from the first one. But in Minis March Again, you have no control over the Minis and can only change the environment around them to affect where they go. Why did the Minis become so damn important in these games? What was once a spiritual successor to a cult classic Game Boy game has become its very own franchise, is now solely revolved around the Minis. The damn Minis are everywhere!
Anyways, Diddy Kong Racing got a remake.
Diddy Kong Racing DS. Oh boy.
Listen, Diddy Kong Racing for the Nintendo 64 is a classic. It's taking what Mario Kart World's doing, but dare I say, even better. Okay, maybe I'll take a truth on that one for now, but the truth is that this game is a joy to play.
A fully explorable world with a campaign mode as well as water and flying mechanics done 14 years before Mario Kart 7, this game was way ahead of its time, so when it came to porting it to the DS, it had to be done right, and it was done. Yeah, it was done. Since the game was originally designed with full 60 degrees of motion with an analog stick and not this thing, something that Nintendo was very keen on doing on the DS was adding lower screen touch controls. Just incredibly unnecessary. I mean, Mario Kart DS came out 2 years prior and that worked just fine. Why add mandatory touch controls for some aspects of the game? Now, as I said many times by now, Rare, who developed this game back in 1997, was bought by Microsoft in 2002. That's kind of the whole reason this era of Donkey Kong exists. And in the original N64 game, 2 characters were available to play as, Banjo and Conker. These fit in great with the rest of the animal roster, but these weren't just any ordinary characters. These were characters that had their own fully fleshed games in development for the N64 at the time. So when it came to putting them in the DS version of the game, since these were exclusively Rare-owned IPs, they weren't able to be put in. Banjo was getting a new game on the Xbox in the distant future, and Conker was left out because instead of looking like this, he looked like this, and now he did this, and this, and this. So who would replace the 2 characters in the DS version? Well, the obvious no-brainer is to include some other Kongs, right? I always felt that this game was a little more distant from the traditional DK format, so adding some would make the game feel a lot more at home. So in their place, they added Dixie Kong, of course, great pick, and why does she look like that? Why does she look like that? So for some reason, Nintendo thought it would be a good idea to redesign Tiny Kong into a teenager? If I'm correct, this is the only time besides the original arcade Donkey Kong turning into Cranky that Nintendo aged up a character. It really makes no sense because Tiny is canonically the little sister of Dixie Kong, who is also added right alongside her and wasn't changed at all. Why is she still a kid if she's the older one?
So yeah, this game is considered to be a D-make by most and is probably why we never saw another Donkey Kong racing game in the future. The hell?
The hell? I didn't order anything from andgigs.com.
Oh, whatever this is, it smells like dog shit. Well, there's only one way to find out. Oh my god! Oh no! Oh my god! It is dog shit!
Donkey Kong Barrel Blast. Once again, this game follows the structure all DK console games have had since Rare left. To control your cart, you have to pretend you're playing bongos. Yay! This game was originally announced for the GameCube and was meant to be compatible with the DK bongos, but like many other early Wii games, it got pushed down the road for a release on their next hardware after the GameCube. Honestly, they probably should have just kicked this thing in the ditch instead. This game is ridiculously slow and boring, and even when you do go fast, if you hit something, you slow down again and again and again. Even at its core as a racing game, it just isn't any fun to play. But there is Lanky Kong.
It controls like absolute horseshit and is one of the worst Nintendo games ever. Here, watch this and tell me if this looks fun.
Okay, that's enough. I started to feel bad.
I'm done with this game. I'm going back to Diddy Kong Racing DS. Oh man, this game sucks too!
I think the later years of this era is really what made Nintendo lock in and actually make a great, more traditional Donkey Kong platformer again. DK had set himself up as the platforming franchise to play in the 90s, with stunning graphics and expansive worlds. But the second Nintendo's Donkey Kong guy went and started making Grab by the Ghoulies and Mr. Pants, he had been limited to the bongo-controlled console games and puzzle platform handheld games. Now yes, DK was getting a fair amount of love post-Rare. In fact, in 2004 alone, Donkey Kong had 5 releases in total across all platforms. Now 2 of those were re-releases and one of them was a rhythm game sequel, but still, you know how many completely original Donkey Kong games released between DKC Tropical Freeze and DK Bonanza? But at least with that, we knew DK had returned to form, and we had been blessed with some of the best 2D platformers of all time. During this era, we didn't know if DK would ever make a true comeback to his original form. For all we knew, he was trapped in Mario's spin-off Hell for eternity. Nintendo loves Donkey Kong. It's very obvious. I mean, they made a whole theme park just for him and his franchise. But when Rare left, they just had no idea what to do with him. Rare had been pumping these games out so fast and filled them with so much charming character that when it was Nintendo's turn to take the reign of DK, they just tried everything they could and hoped something would stick.
Now the question is, did any of this stick? No, not really.
This era of DK is weird. It was so experimental, even the kind of traditional 2D game that they made in this era just screamed. Looking back, especially after the Returns games and Bonanza, it's so bizarre to see the DK franchise take on all these kinds of games instead of the traditional platformers that he's so well known for. And at the time, the sentiment was the same. When Donkey Kong Country Returns was announced, the first completely traditional, well, almost, 2D Donkey Kong platformer in over 10 years, it was magical. After the identity crisis that Donkey Kong went through since the early 2000s, seeing him return to his true form was exactly what we all wanted to see.
So to rein it in, was the awkward era of Donkey Kong really all that bad? There were some really cool experiences and some not so cool experiences. But to be able to look back on these games without having to worry that Donkey Konga 4 is the next game that's most likely to come out, it makes it a lot easier to appreciate these games for how weird they are. But seriously, what the hell were they hiding in Donkey Konga 3?